Welcome everyone. Also, so that you know, we are screen recording here, which will go on the website without the periscope effects of maybe non-leveling camera. All right. I am Ann McCarty. I'm the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning for Bowling Green City Schools. I'm in my third year of this position at Bowling Green City Schools. Prior to that, I was a middle school principal in Arlington, Virginia. I was a middle school teacher. I've also worked in schools in Ohio. I have been an adjunct professor at George Washington University, and I am also a member of the Association for Middle Level Education. I'm on their leadership faculty. So I work with schools across the United States in that capacity.
And I'm Melanie Garbick, and I'm the Executive Director of Pupil Services. I've been with Bowling Green Schools for over 20 years now. I started as elementary guidance counselor and then moved to the high school guidance counselor, and then previous to this position, this is my first year as Executive Director, I was the principal at Crim Elementary for the last 6 years. So Bowling Green's definitely my home, and I consider this the best school district ever. So I'm glad to be here to help present this information.
The title of tonight's presentation is Why Consolidation? Inclusive Education and Professional Learning Communities. So when most people think about school buildings, they think about school buildings and the structures of a school building. When I think of a school building, I envision it from the inside out. I'm curriculum and instruction, Melanie is student services, and so we think of the students and their environment and the teaching environment and what that looks like. So we wanted to educate you on the inside out version of consolidation of the schools. We've heard a lot about the outside. We want you to hear a little bit about the inside. Like all good teachers, we have a learning goal for this session. We wanted to make sure that we did that. So by the end of this presentation, you'll have an understanding of how consolidating our 3 elementary schools will better serve all of our students through inclusive education, professional learning communities, and equity of resources. So first thing we have to do is make sure that we're all speaking from the same page and that we're all using the same terms.
Okay, so we're going to start with inclusive education. So inclusive education happens when children with or without disabilities participate and learn together. Research shows that when students with disabilities attend classes alongside their peers, really good things happen. And you know that is something that is really near and dear to me, being an inclusive, having that inclusion, having that ability to bring everyone together in one building so our resources can be broadened and we can serve more students that way. So that's what inclusive education means.
And professional learning communities. They are an ongoing process in which educators work collaboratively in recurring cycles of collective inquiry and action research to achieve better results for the students that they serve. Professional learning communities operate under the assumption that the key to improved learning for all students is continuous job-embedded learning for educators. This means that we want our teachers working in collaborative teams, planning lessons and assessments that are in the best interest of the students. And collectively, they're doing that. That is what the essence of professional learning communities is. We're going to hear a short clip from who is probably my favorite educational hero next to Francis Scrucci. This is Rick Dufour. Rick Dufour dedicated his life to implementing professional learning communities around the world. 42 years of research he spent implementing professional learning communities and helping school districts. He sums it up much nicer than I think anybody else can because it was his life's work. So we're going to listen to what he says. This is a speech that he gave after he wrote his last book, just before he died from cancer just a little over a year ago.
We know what we need to do in order to improve student and adult learning. The question is, will we give a higher priority to creating those conditions, or will we assign a higher priority to preserving our traditional structure and culture? Now, what is it that PLCs do? If we implemented what we know to be best practice, we would make sure that educators were organized into collaborative teams in which members work together interdependently to achieve common SMART goals for which members are mutually accountable. Organizations are more effective when people work collaboratively rather than in isolation. If we were to say, we're going to reconvene in a month, and this half of the room, I want you to find all the research you can from both education and organizational theorists that say organizations and schools work better when people work collaboratively. I want you to find all the professional organizations who have endorsed the idea that we should be working together collaboratively. Bring that research in here next month. You would be able to provide me with hundreds of research studies and over 40 different professional organizations in the United States alone that say this is what we should be doing. If I were to say to you on this side of the room, find all the research you can, inside and outside of education, that says organizations are more effective, kids learn at higher levels when teachers work in isolation, and tell me all the organizations that have endorsed teachers working in isolation, you would be hard-pressed to come back in a month with anything. So the weight of the evidence here isn't even close. We know that all the evidence, all the research, all of our professional organizations, and common sense tells us it's better to work together collaboratively rather than in isolation. And so if we acted on what we know, every educator in North America would be assigned to a meaningful team, would be provided with time to collaborate on a regular basis, would be crystal clear on the work they need to do, and would receive the resources and support they need in order to promote their success.
And I think one of the most important things that Rick says in this video is that teachers should not work in isolation. And it's important to note that because of our current structure at our elementary schools, we do have teachers who have to work in isolation. For example, we have some teachers who only teach math at one grade level or only teach English at one grade level. So they don't have anybody within their building that they can collaborate with to have the power of the professional learning community. When we consolidate, we then bring the wisdom of the crowd together, and we have teachers who are no longer working in isolation, and we get the benefits of everything that PLCs can bring. The other person we're going to hear from is Becky Dufour, who is Rick's wife, and alongside him has done all of the work with him. And I apologize for the size of the video. It just fit on the screen.
The first big idea is that as educators that serve those students, we embrace learning as our fundamental purpose. And because of that, we're going to be willing to examine all of our practices, policies, programs, procedures, everything we do in school through the lens of, does this impact learning in a positive way?
Okay, so the focus on learning is the number one thing here. So the very essence of a learning community is the focus on and a commitment to the learning of each student. When a school or a district functions as a PLC, educators within the organization embrace high levels of learning for all students as both the reason the organization exists and the fundamental responsibility of those who work within it. So a professional learning community believes all students can learn at high levels, and that's that inclusive environment. Being a building principal, that was one of the things that I strive for the last 6 years that I was at CRIM, is just everybody working together and not making any excuses for our students. You know, we all work together as teams to come up and collaborate and decide what would be the best for our students and not letting anything else really get in the way. And when we bring everybody together with that same focus in all of those elementary buildings, we can do so much more with our students. So that's one of the powerful things about bringing those together. Those isolates would not be isolated anymore from having other people to, bounce things on and off with. So that is definitely one of the benefits.
One of the things that I always tell the teachers when I'm working with them is that the answers are in the room.
Mm-hmm.
You bring all those educators together. Someone in the room has the answer. You have to have the time and the resources to be able to figure out who has that answer and how they can share it with everyone. When you're together and you have that time embedded into your schedule and you have the place to collaborate and the time and the resources, you now have created the situation where you can pull the answers in the room to solve the problems that you're having.
The first big idea. We also recognize that there's no way we can ever hope to help all kids learn unless we, the educators who serve those students, learn to work together. So we build a collaborative culture. We take collective responsibility for the success of all of our students.
This is probably my favorite part about the professional learning communities is the collaborative culture. Collaboration means to an end, not the end itself. In many schools, staff members are willing to collaborate on a variety of topics as long as the focus of the conversation stops at their classroom door. So I'll play nice over here, and then when I get to my door, I'm going to shut it and I'm going to do whatever I want. PLCs do not allow for that. It is a group effort. In a PLC, collaboration represents a systematic process in which teachers work together interdependently in order to impact their classroom practice in ways that will lead to better results for their students, for their team, and for their school. The professional learning community focuses on the learning of all students and the belief in their achievement. I think the biggest piece of professional learning communities is it takes the focus from the learning to the teaching. Its focus is on the adult behaviors. And it's not about this student didn't do this student didn't do this, or this didn't happen. It's what did I do that resulted in this? Or what did we do that resulted in this? And if we didn't have a great result, how can we come together to create a different result? The number one effect size on student achievement is what's called collective teacher efficacy. If that is directly tied to teacher belief in student achievement. John Hattie is an educational researcher. What he does is meta-analysis. So he takes research study after research study. I think he's up to over 1,500 studies now that he is combining in the research. And he has created this, and this is not the best picture, but this is the barometer of effect. And the 0.4 that you see, these are all the teacher effects. And he goes even down to what are negative effects all the way up to positive effects. So, of course, homework is in there, drug abuse is in there, single parent home. The list is very exhaustive of the effect sizes. The number one effect size, that collective teacher efficacy, meaning we believe all students can learn, and we believe by doing it collectively. So that is the essence of the professional learning community. 0.4 equates to about 1 year's growth. Would anybody like to guess what collective teacher efficacy is? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Someone guess for me. Come on, Elise. 0.7. That is a great guess. It is 1.56. It's off the Richter scale, no pun intended, as you see. Yeah. So we know that if our teachers collaborate and they do it well and they believe all students can learn at high levels, we can get almost 3 years of growth for students. That is the school from the inside out. That is the essence of a professional learning community.
And we use results to drive our efforts, to let us know whether what we're doing is truly making a difference. We've become very, very results-driven, evidence-based practitioners.
So working together to build shared knowledge on the best way to achieve goals and meet the needs of clients is exactly what professionals in any field are expected to do. Whether it's curing a patient, winning the lawsuit, or helping all students learn, members of a professional learning community are expected to work and learn together. Collective inquiry enables team members to develop new skills and capabilities that in turn lead to new experiences and awareness. Teachers cite collaboration as the #1 form of professional development, which is the key tenet of professional learning communities. And I have to say that that is exactly what my teachers would tell you. And in my new role, working with the intervention specialists and the group of other special people in the district, counselors and such, that is what we talk about all the time, is time to work together, time to collaborate. Collaboration is something that I saw from the beginning of the time that I started at CRIM, and by the time I ended, we had developed a way to collaborate pretty much on a daily basis for each grade level. And you know, some of you may recall how CRIM improved on the grade card, from the last couple of years. And I truly believe it's because we offered that opportunity for teachers to work together to come up with solutions and to do the best job they can for those students. So, I'm all about collaboration. I think it's definitely #1.
And I will say our current configuration does inhibit that practice for our teachers. You wouldn't think that a drive across town could stop that, but even a hallway can make a physical barrier to making that happen. The last part of PLCs is continuous improvement. If you're familiar with the Plan, Do, Study, Act model, this is very similar. Inherent to a PLC it's a persistent disquiet with the status quo. And Rick Dufour was really big about challenging the status quo. Even when his school was doing well, he said, well, what can we be doing better? It was never good enough for the students in the building. It's a constant search for a better way to achieve goals and accomplish the purpose of the organization. Systematic processes engage each member of the organization in an ongoing cycle of gathering evidence, developing strategies, implementing the strategies, analyzing the impact of them, and then applying the new knowledge. What makes a PLC different than teachers planning just a lesson together is that they're gathering data. They're really looking at what's happening in the classroom. They're using the research to show them which strategies work, and then they're implementing it in the classroom, and then they're coming back and they're doing the most forgotten art of education, which is reflection. When you're teaching, you get to the end of the day, and I think it's Madeline Hunter started reflection at the end of the lesson a long time ago. By the time you get to the end of the day, you're just barely breathing. You don't have time to sit and write in your journal about, oh, this lesson went really well, I would change this for next year. That process is inherent in professional learning communities because that's what they're doing. They're not just planning the next lesson. They're talking about what went well, what didn't go well, what do we want the students to know and be able to do, how are we going to teach it, how are we going to assess it, what are we going to do for students who don't respond, and what are we going to do for students who already show mastery? Because we have to consider the needs of all students. The goal is not simply to learn a new strategy. It's instead to create conditions for a perpetual learning environment. I love those words, that perpetual learning environment, in which innovation and experimentation are viewed not as tasks to be accomplished or projects to be completed, but as ways of conducting day-to-day business forever. Once you've adopted the PLC philosophy, that is just how you do business. When I used to interview teachers, I would say, are you familiar with the professional learning community? How do you collaborate? What do you bring to a team? What are your strengths? Because this is how we roll. This is how we do business. So if you're not ready to come in and do that type of business, then this is not the right organization for you because there's so much power in it. I felt that this quote summed it up very well. And when the PLC process drives an entire system, that being our consolidated elementary school, participants come to have a sense of identity that goes beyond just their own piece of the system. So it's not just my classroom, it's not just my grade level. They identify in palpable ways with the overall organization. So now we all have a purpose. We're making sure that all students learn at high levels, which unleashes the energy of mutual allegiance and competition for the common good. Who wouldn't want that for their children, right? So one of the things that we've heard is, what is this whole equity of resources thing? What does that actually mean? I'm going to turn this over to Melanie because this one is big in her department.
Yeah.
This is her.
Absolutely.
This is her wheelhouse.
Sure. So this is definitely my baby and something that evokes a lot of emotion really in me when I think about the inequity across the district, especially across the elementary buildings as far as resources go. If you want to go to the next screen, we'll kind of talk. Well, we'll talk about the Title I a little bit first. Title I is a state program that our school district gets funding for that, and in order to get Title I services, you have to show some poverty in the particular building, and so there's only 2 out of our 3 elementary buildings that actually have Title I, and currently there's two types of Title I programs. There's a targeted Title I, which is provides financial assistance in that Title I at the top. It just supports students that are just one student here, one student there, not everybody. A school-wide title program, which is what Krim and Kenwood have, is wonderful actually, because what they can do is we have title teachers that can go in and support the whole population. They don't have to target just those certain students that qualify under a certain umbrella. So school-wide title program is really an effective way to increase those reading scores and to help students that start down here, close that gap and get back up here. One of the things that we can go to the next slide because I think
I'm going to comment real quick on this.
Go ahead.
This question has come up. What happens if we consolidate to current services? and we are going to talk about this a little bit later, when we did the school-wide title applications, you can grandfather those schools in. So when we go to open a new building, regardless of what we name it, if we put it under the IRN, which is the district identifier number for that school, every school has a number attached to it, anything that we have gets grandfathered in under that number. This is the way the federal dollars work. So we would bring our school-wide title program under either the CRIM or the Kenwood umbrella, because those are both school-wide programs. What is so nice about it is if you are the targeted assistance program, so we are targeted assistants at the middle school, we have a finite number of students that we can serve. When you have full school title, it opens up to serve the entire school. It opens up your funds to be able to spend it on every child. And what's so nice about it is where our title teachers used to just maybe pull a group of 5 or 6 students, they're now in the classroom co-teaching with the classroom teachers. And maybe, Melanie, you can tell them what that looks like, because
Sure.
you saw it firsthand.
Sure, yeah. So that is the really nice thing, because they now can go in, and with guided reading, it's small groups anyway. And so title teachers and intervention specialists in some buildings can go in and they can serve small groups of children, whether they're identified or not, whether they have, they don't have to be identified as a title reading person. They don't have to be identified as a learning disability. Those Title I teachers can go in and serve anyone. So what used to be a pull-out program back in the day, where you'd go, you'd walk down to the reading room and you'd get your reading services and go back, now becomes a push-in program where the title reading teacher can go in, teach alongside the regular education teacher, provide that intervention, do a small reading group, whatever it might be, and then later on, if they need to pull a small group into a different room or into the back of the room at a table, and they can target on those interventions down there. So it really it opens up the possibility for everybody to get an intervention when they need an intervention, because not everybody learns everything all at once. There's always that time when somebody might need a little review, and so it gives the opportunity for those teachers to be able to target anybody that needs help.
And in case you just need a nerd statistic, the effect size on reciprocal teaching and co-teaching is a 0.8. All right, let's talk about what title actually looks like in our 3 elementary schools. Currently at CRIM, it is a school-wide title program. They have 2.5 title reading teachers. All students have access to highly qualified title staff for extra help. At Kenwood Elementary School, it is also a school-wide title program. They have 2 title reading teachers, and all students have access to highly qualified title staff for extra help. At Conneaut, there are no title services. Limited students have access to 1 reading specialist for extra help. Now, you can't tell me that there aren't students at Conneaut that may need a little bit of help in reading. I just won't believe you if you tell me that. So we've got the students at CRIM who have access to 2.5 teachers, and the students at Conneaut who have access to 0. When we consolidate the schools, we now have 4.5 reading teachers, and you may even see more title, so you could potentially have a reading teacher for every grade. Now that's when you really start getting into the business of helping students.
And so now we go into the special education facts. So again, it's similar to the title reading. There is an inequity of services among the 3 buildings. At CRIM Elementary, there's an intervention specialist that serves each grade level. There's also, I'd like to mention this too, there's also, there's a full-time OT, occupational therapist, there's a full-time physical therapist, there's a full-time school psychologist that works in that building. They're constantly providing information to teachers that the other buildings don't get. They team teach and go in, and they'll work with grade levels, and they'll teach them things about sensory issues and things like that. The other buildings don't get that because they don't have those services at those buildings, because they don't have the students that have those needs. So then you go to Kenwood and you've got 4 intervention specialists there. They're working with multiple grade levels. They have a speech person, or not a speech person, an occupational therapist that comes in, grabs a student, works with them, leaves the building. They're not there. They're not integrated into their building. They're not working on preventative programs or anything like that. They're just targeting that one student because they've got to move on because they probably have to go over to Conneaut and serve somebody over there. Conneaut, then, just like Tidal, they only have 3 intervention specialists. They serve multiple grade levels. Ariane Newman, for example, serves kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. That's a lot of grades to serve, and it's a lot to handle in that early, really critical time to do a lot of work with those students. She's spread thin. So there's definitely an inequality as far as resources go, and it's because there's greater need at one elementary, so all those resources get poured into there, where all those things could be spread out among everyone in a consolidated situation.
So Melanie, one of the things that we know is that intervention specialists have a lot of paperwork to do.
Mm-hmm.
And each intervention specialist carries what they call a caseload. So what is the caseload, because of this disparity, what does the caseload look like, or is that equitable among the staff?
Well, that's the other problem. So at Krim Elementary, for example, all the intervention specialists are at their maximum of their caseload. Actually, there's one intervention specialist that's over. So that building has saturated. They can have a caseload of 16 students. The 5th grade intervention specialist actually has 18. So they are saturated at that building. So that, so they've got, the caseload is there, so they've got a lot of resources there, but that is a lot of work. That's a lot of meetings. That's a lot of needs. And then you go. Let's just use Conneaut, for example, and their caseload is 3/4 of that. Each one of those teachers have. They're not at their max for any of them. So there is an inequality there because you've got these teachers over here that are working with a full caseload and oftentimes over. Plus, there's a lot of kids coming in behind them to get tested or whatever it might be, and so they're always a revolving door and always have that saturation. That's probably one of the things that it would just be so nice to be able to spread that out and allow for students to get more intervention and more attention if they're with an intervention specialist that has a little bit smaller caseload and can serve those needs in a greater way.
Would it also allow us to be more creative with the student schedule to give them services?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we talk about a lot is we've got certain needs. And for example, we have students that maybe have, let's say kindergarten, for example. In each 3 building, we probably have a handful of kindergartners, maybe 2 or 3 at least, that could use a small group setting for a while just to get used to school, get their behaviors under control. And we really don't have anything like that. We have to just have them in the regular classroom. We offer support. We have a lot of paraprofessionals in the district. But if we had the ability to, again, be creative with our teaching staff, be creative with our resources, and say, one teacher is going to focus on kindergarten students that aren't quite ready for kindergarten or that need a little extra kindergarten boot camp. How do I act in this classroom? Then we can offer some of those resources for them in a building where you've got everybody together, and you can be very, very creative in that.
Okay, so one thing that we haven't talked much about is preschool, and I'm going to let Melanie talk about this because she kind of informed me about this. The benefits of being able to expand our preschool. We've talked about this from a facility standpoint, but I think there are other things out there that the public is unaware of. So Melanie, if you could.
Sure. So our preschool right now is a special needs preschool. It's considered a special needs preschool, which means that we serve 50% of our students are students that have a disability. 50% of those are what we call our peer students. And our peers have to pay to come to our preschool. It's not very expensive, but it still can be too expensive for some families, especially our low-income families. Because of our current setup, we're not able to expand our hours. We're not able to really provide that full-day program that would allow us to get an early childhood grant for families. Families can apply for these grants only if their students are in preschool for a certain amount of time per week, and we fall short by about 3 hours, believe it or not. But the other thing about that is that if we did a consolidated elementary, we could go to Crim Elementary, take our preschool to Crim Elementary, expand that program to as many classes as we think we might need, so that we can generate and serve our pre-kindergarten, our preschool population in a greater way. We could have a full day program. We could offer the early childhood grants for families so that every student can come to preschool, to our preschool where we have master's degree teachers. We're a 5-star quality program. We have the full gamut of services there, and it would be the best thing for our pre-kindergarten students. We could do a pre-kindergarten program there, full day, and get these kids ready for kindergarten. So I'm excited about that possibility. The preschools, we have a wonderful preschool program in Bowling Green. It's absolutely wonderful. And to be able to expand that would be fabulous. It would be a great thing for everybody.
And I think what's important here is those who qualify as low income. For those of you that don't know, Bowling Green is 43% free and reduced, which is a lot higher than most people probably think that it is. And that's just the people that are taking advantage of the free and reduced lunch. The number could be much greater than that. We don't know unless they fill out the lunch application. In our research of doing this, we started looking at the disparity of vocabulary and reading exposure that students of poverty have prior to coming to school. There's a very long longitudinal study of elementary. They wrote a book about it called Inequality at the Starting Gate. And the short version of this 10-year study, I think it is, that they've done, is that students who live in poverty have a lot less exposure to words. And I think the two most astounding facts that we looked up were a student who comes from a middle class to upper class home has about 1,700 hours of one-on-one reading in a book with an adult. A child who comes from poverty has 25 hours.
We were we were like, whoa.
On average, students in poverty have 66% less words coming to school than students who are not in poverty. That makes preschool so important. And it makes preschool for low income even more important, because we know if they're not getting it in the home, that we then have to provide it. Other equitable resources, and these are just some of what I would call the heavy hitters of consolidation. Currently, in all of our buildings, we have what we call book rooms. It's akin to the library, but it's a sister to the library in the school in that it's a resource for the teacher, and it has leveled readers in it. A variety of fiction and nonfiction, content-related, non-content-related, fun reading, not so fun reading, you name it, it's in there. Each building has one. What I can tell you is that the schools that have had title monies or Race to the Top grant money, their book rooms are much more flush with resources. The book room at Kenwood is actually overflowing. And if you were to walk in the two book rooms at Kenwood and Crim, you'll notice a vast difference between that and the book room at Conneaut. And it's simply because those federal dollars that purchase those books cannot be spent to buy books at Conneaut. The free and reduced lunch. This question has come up. Do we lose free and reduced lunch if we consolidate the schools? The answer is no. Those who qualify will always qualify for free and reduced lunch. That does not change. The one question that we don't know the answer to yet is currently at Crim, because it's based on a different database of if you hit a threshold of 80% of your population being able to having access to, they would qualify for free and reduced lunch, then the whole school becomes 100% free and reduced. So right now at Crim, all students eat for free breakfast and lunch. What we don't know is when we consolidate, if that 80% is our entire population. We just don't know yet. And we won't know until we go to apply for the school. But free and reduced never stops coming. So those who qualify will always qualify for that. Consolidation allows our title funds to be spent on all of our Bowling Green City School elementary students, not just those at the buildings who qualify. To me, that's one of the biggest pieces there, because it doesn't just go into buying supplies. Most of our title monies are spent on staffing, so the reading specialists, the reading teachers, and our professional development money also comes out of title. It's a different title, but those are all federal monies, and when everyone is in the same place, we can spend those with more judiciously and have access for all teachers and all students. Connecting kids to meals. This is currently located at CRIM. They would continue to be a community program, and they would move locations. I'm going to ask Melanie to tell us a little bit about Connecting Kids to Meals for those of you who don't know what that is.
Yeah, Connecting Kids to Meals is actually a nonprofit group that brings dinner to CRIM Elementary Stars every day. And actually, anybody in the community could, even if you went to Kenwood or Conneaut, you could actually go over there at 4:30 and walk in and get a meal, up to age 18. But it is a service that could be expanded into and consolidated elementary for everyone. And it's part of our STARS program. They bring in hot meals, and they're wonderful. And every student that goes to STARS, and like I said, and anybody else that would want to participate, gets a meal every night. And that could be a program that would definitely move locations and be able to serve more of our students.
They've been a wonderful partner for us.
They have, yeah.
And the last one is the combination of technology. Currently in the district, we are 2-to-1, meaning that we have one device for every 2 students. When we bring all of the technology together, which is a lot of Chromebook carts, it's iPads, it's computers, that allows us to provide access to maybe whole grades to have access to it, or whoever may need it, or different devices. So as we continue to add devices, because technology is a hot button, when are we going to be 1-to-1? We'll be 1-to-1 when it's appropriate for us, but we want to make sure that everyone has access to that, and pooling those resources helps us a lot with that. We have reached the end of our informational presentation, and this is the point where you get to ask questions.
Are you worried about having so many students in one school?
That's a good question, and we've heard that question actually. And it's a good, I don't have an aerial view. And actually, my life prior to here was a school that had 1,100 students in it. So the question always becomes, how do you make the big school feel small? So am I worried about having that many students together? No, but we have to be very careful in how we structure it. When you look at the building plans, it is designed that all of the K-1 students are in one physical wing of the school. The 2-3 students are in another physical wing of the school, and the 4-5 students are in a third physical wing of the school. That's what we call the schools within schools. That's how you make a big school feel small. As a middle school principal, I always said middle school had a lot to learn from elementary. I think in this case, elementary has a little bit to learn from middle school. We know the teaming model at the middle school is a wonderful model. We would have to adopt something similar to that, where we still have small teacher teams within the schools within schools to make that big school feel small. The teacher teams may look like 3 or 4 teachers that share 20 sets of 24 students. That 24 is the number for kindergarten, whatever the planning factor number is. Of 75 students, and so they only have those. And again, we're not going to pile 45 students into a room because they're all in one place. Those numbers still stay the same. We have one teacher, we have 22, 23 students. Mm-hmm. Then we have our small teacher teams, much like we have at the elementary schools now, and that's how you make a big school feel small. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
How does this affect special education teachers?
The question is, how does this affect special education teachers? I'm gonna let Melanie take
Okay.
that one.
Well, it's not really going to affect them in any way, as far as no one's going to lose their job. They're still going to be able to serve kids really the same way. I think if anything, it's going to allow special education teachers the opportunity to collaborate more with their peers. That's the other thing about that. When you have even though you have 5 special education teachers in a building, they're still kind of an island on their own in their own little grade level. And so you will have the opportunity, they will have the opportunity to come together, work together, collaborate, talk about, tough cases, tough situations, be able to problem solve together. I think it'll be wonderful for them. I think that they will be provided more resources. They'll have more support. Our support personnel and some of the things that we have already in place at the different buildings, that can be spread out, and it also can be used differently and perhaps more economically even. I think that's the other thing too. We can think a little bit differently and be more creative in the way that we serve students.
Yes.
In your research that you've either read or conducted, have you found any negative aspects to consolidation or any dangers or perils that we need to look for when it comes to consolidation?
That's a good question. So I'm going to try and paraphrase the question. It's what are the risks of consolidating?
Very good.
Is that a good?
That's
Okay.
much better. I do Southern Baroque.
Right, and you can, if you do the research and you look at consolidation, you'll find, like anything else with research, you'll find some positives and you'll find some negatives. I think some of the things that we have to debunk on that is the word consolidation is the first one that I want to talk about, because consolidation is typically combining school districts. So a consolidation, and this is probably where people start to get a little bit more emotional, is it might be, if you were truly the word consolidation, you might be combining Otsego, Bowling Green, and maybe Eastwood together. Then you're bringing 3 different sets of populations together. We're not talking about that. We're talking about creating a community of learners for our students where they're all together. So it is consolidating our own elementary schools, not different districts. Then there are the studies that you'll find that say, oh, these mega schools have all of this violent behavior in it. I think that's the one that when you do read it, you see it. I think you have to look at our statistics and you have to generalize our statistics. We do not have any violence in any of our elementary schools. So there's no reason for us to think that combining those students into one school is going to all of a sudden create an environment where now it's violent. Again, we're talking about a K1 wing, a 2-3 wing, and a 4-5 wing, completely separate from the middle school and the high school. And we're not going to have kindergartners riding the bus with 12th graders either. The bus is the scary thing, and the bus is where all the bad behaviors get learned, in case no one is sure. That's why, our days at middle school were wonderful until the bus. That end of the day bus ride was always rough, not for the students. So there's no reason for us to think that our stats would change any. And again, we're going to have the same amount of personnel, the same eyes on the students, the same loving arms at the door greeting them, creating that nice, friendly environment at the elementary.
Yeah. And I just want to add too, I think that, having the opportunity to work, if I were being a principal, if I had the opportunity to work, let's say, with the K1 building within the building, it would be so nice to be able to develop and create and think of programming just around that age level and not have to worry about whether that's going to fit the 3rd graders or the 4th graders, the 5th graders, not have to worry about, oh gosh, we got to do, we have a assembly that the 3rd graders need to go to, so that's going to interrupt their day right now. Instead, it's all going to, you can really think of that in terms of providing services and providing programming for that targeted population of students, whether it be the K1, the 2-3 student, or the 4-5. So everything can be developmentally appropriate, and really their days can be much more productive, I feel like, because you don't have the large span of ages to deal with all the time. So you don't have to have those students that you'd be dealing with at that grade band. I think that would be a great advantage.
Yes.
That kind of is close to what I was going to ask, which is how does this consolidation affect the delivery of educational services? And you just touched upon one.
Yeah,
Right.
I think definitely.
And I'd like to touch on a couple of more outside of what Melanie just said, because we have our services aren't just special education. That tends to be the one that everyone talks about because that's the one everyone knows about. But we also have second language learners, those who do not speak English as their primary language. And we also have gifted students. And then you also have twice exceptional students who need a number of services. And currently, because of our setup, we have one teacher who serves our second language students and has to go to all 3 buildings. The research will tell you that those students need about 90 minutes of instruction in ELA every day. There's not that much time in the day for her to be able to do that. And so they are what are some of our most vulnerable learners because they don't speak English, and the statistics for dropout for second language learners is if you don't get them hooked in the first 3 to 5 years, the dropout rate is crazy once they get to high school. This would allow us to have all of the students in one place to be able to provide them with the real services and the time that they need in the instruction. Our gifted population, the PACE program, they see the PACE teacher 1 day a week, and they are pulled from their regular school and they are bused over to Kenwood. If they're all in one place, you can still have them see the gifted teacher for that, but she can also work with all the teachers, help them with differentiation, help them provide enriching activities in the classroom. And so the services are all right there in the same building. And so it's not just delivery of services for special education students, it's delivery of services for all students.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking that question. Anything else?
This was a very impressive presentation. I really enjoyed it. How are you going to get this information to the people in the community who think consolidation is a bad thing?
We're going to put, maybe Jenny wants to answer that.
Am I ahead of the game? Am I ahead of the
We
program?
are working with Greg Esposito on our committee, and he is putting together, we are within days of having a website, and this will be on the website. For anyone who goes onto the website, they will be able to see this. And the fact that it has been on Paris live streamed on Facebook tonight, this will spread into the community, and those that have seen it will be able to say, can you believe what I just saw on the Consolidated Elementary? If people have questions, they come to one of us. We can say, if you really want the information, go onto our website. The entire presentation is there. We are really trying to get this spread into the community. So, does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.